Okay, thanks, Rachel. We encourage you all to attend that in person if you're here on an island with us on Oahu. The event will also be broadcast on YouTube. Please see our events page on our PI-CASC website for more information, and look out for announcements to come on Climate Week and that PI-CASC symposium. So moving to our event today, this Slice of PI-CASC monthly seminar series provides a platform for sharing state-of-the-art climate adaptation research and science and management applications in Hawaii, the U.S. affiliated Pacific Islands, and beyond. For those of you joining us in person, if you haven't already, please help yourself to a lunch in the back. And at the conclusion of the talk, we'll also have a key lime backyard buoys themed pie provided by Rachel. Thank you very much, Rachel. So please stick around at the end for a slice of pie. All right, so this presentation is being recorded. It will be available on the PI-CASC website under news and events in a few days. And for those of you joining us online, please keep your microphones on mute during the presentation. We will have time for questions following presentation, but do feel free to leave any questions in the chat along the way, or save them until the end. So with that, it is my honor to introduce our friends Melissa Iwamoto, Jordan Watson, and Nicole Guiles from the Pacific Islands Ocean Observing System, or PacIOOS, who will be sharing with us today on their project Backyard Buoys, community-led ocean observing across the Pacific. PI-CASC is not funding this particular project, but we are excited to have this opportunity to share this exciting work by one of our longtime partners and close friends in the Pacific Islands region. So thank you all for being here today. Some quick introductions. We have Melissa Iwamoto, who has been with PacIOOS since 2011, serving as the program's director since 2016. Prior to joining PacIOOS, she was a planner for the Hawaii Coastal Zone Management Program, where I think we first crossed paths, Melissa. While originally from Indiana, Melissa has been passionately invested in the Pacific Islands since her days as a Peace Corps volunteer in YAP, Federated States of Micronesia. She has a Bachelor in Geology and Master's in Geography from the University of Hawaii at Manoa. According to Jordan, Melissa also has a rooster named Rocky, who I understand likes to make appearance in Zoom calls. Is that right? Okay. We also have with us Dr. Jordan Watson, who is the Deputy Director for PacIOOS and is part of the core team for this Backyard Buoys project. Jordan coordinates the team of PacIOOS liaisons across the Pacific territories and freely associated states, and also manages a Green Climate Fund grant to expand oceanographic services in Palau. Jordan's PhD is in fisheries from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Before joining PacIOOS, Jordan spent 25 years conducting marine science research in tropical and polar ecosystems, including a decade at the Alaska Fisheries Science Center in Juneau. True to his background in fisheries science, Jordan is convinced that the Pacific spiny lumpsucker fish is cuter than most kittens. I had to look it up. It's pretty darn cute. Yeah, it is. And then we have Nicole Guiles, who joined PacIOOS team in April 2022 as a data and program assistant, and has transitioned into her role as communications specialist this past October. Nicole earned her Bachelor of Science degree in marine biology from the Evergreen State College in Washington State and moved to Hawaii in 1999. For many years, her focus was on homeschooling her 3 daughters and teaching science classes at local homeschool co-ops. Now that one of her kids have graduated from high school, she's excited to get back to her marine roots with PacIOOS. So welcome, 3 of you. Thank you all for being here with us today. Nicole, you're going to start it off, right? Okay, and then we're going to tag team the presentation, I guess.
Yes,
yep. All right, thank you.
Hello, hi. I am wearing a microphone, but if I'm not talking loud enough, just let me know. So welcome, everybody. There's our beautiful logo, and it represents the buoy that's sitting right there on that front table. So as you can see from our logo, Backyard Buoys works to get wave data into the hands of those who need it. And our approach prioritizes co-design and supports community autonomy. But before we dive into Backyard Buoys, I'll give a quick background on the U.S. Integrated Ocean Observing System, PacIOOS, and PacIOOS, the Pacific Island Ocean Observing System. Within NOAA, there are 6 line offices, including National Ocean Service, NOS. PacIOOS is a program office within the NOS. The PacIOOS program office coordinates the federal side of 11 regional associations. These regional associations themselves are not federal, though they're primarily federally funded, and are stakeholder-driven, science-based, and policy neutral. PacIOOS is one of the 11 regional associations and functions as an independent program that sits at the University of Hawaii at Manoa School of Ocean and Earth Science and Technology, SOAS. As part of PacIOOS, our core funding comes through NOAA, NOS, but we've also received funding from the National Weather Service, the Office of Insular Affairs, state, city, and county, and recently NSF and the US State Department. It's all for funding and collaboration with researchers to collect information and develop tools to aid decision-making. PacIOOS believes that ocean data and information can help save lives and protect livelihoods and resources. Our mission is to empower ocean users and stakeholders in the region by providing accurate and reliable coastal and ocean information, tools, and services that are easy to access and use. Our ocean observing instruments, forecasts, and data services generally fit into these categories. In this talk about backyard buoys, we're going to focus on the waves and the engagement and education portion of our program. Everything we do is available on our website, including observations and forecasts. The focus of the website is to provide quick and easy access to the observations that PacIOOS collects and the forecasts that we generate. And now, onto the backyard buoys. Yes, you are.
Okay. Okay, I'll just hold it. Okay, now on to backyard buoys. Thanks, Nicole. All right, so what is backyard buoys? It's a lot of things, but first and foremost, it's a project funded by the NSF Convergence Accelerator Program. And our mission is to support the collection, the stewardship, and the use of wave data that complements existing knowledge systems and enhances safety at sea in a changing climate. The project is led by the three of the 11 regional associations that Nicole just described: PacIOOS in Alaska, NANUS in the Pacific Northwest, and PacIOOS here in the Pacific Islands. And the 3 organizations serve as coordination points for all of the partners that are participating in backyard buoys. And we will learn more about all of the other amazing partners shortly.
They're plugged in. Right, keep
Are you
going.
good? Okay.
Going.
But first we want to explain why we're doing this project. Oops, can you advance one? So who better to explain the need for this project than a few of our project partners? And in this case, in this first video, it's a partner from the Quinault Indian Nation on the Washington coast. Apologies, technical difficulties.
I'm muted now because the feedback was happening, but if I,
No, that should, the Zoom should be muted, but your computer can have sound.
okay,
Yeah, there you go. Try that.
okay, but then nobody here can hear it.
Should be coming through the Zoom. I don't know.
Apologies, we forgot to tell them that we had a video presentation.
We tested it on our side, but
Yeah, that would help too, actually. When you shared, did you click on the box thing from your computer?
I don't know.
Let's share, you know. Oh, like down, yeah, I know. Share. Oh. No.
Hang
There
tight,
you go.
folks, while we
Yep.
work this out. Be right back with you.
To a hole at the mouth of the Quinault River on a beautiful, calm day. Pacific Ocean out in front. The ocean is always provided, but it also threatens, especially more recently with climate change, sea level rise, higher temperatures, greater storm ferocity, more frequent storms. An affordable wave buoy system would allow the opportunity to warn people of impending building storms that could breach the little seawall out there. And that's why we would love to have a buoy system that augments what little we have out there already at the ocean for weather buoys. They're few and far between, and we live in a very remote area here at the Quinault Indian Nation.
So in talking with communities from the tropics to the Arctic, we heard a few really key needs. First, we heard, as you heard from Joe, that there's a need for an affordable wave buoy system to support safety, especially in a changing climate. Okay, next we'll hear from one of our community partners in American Samoa. How do I do it? Do I just say that?
Go ahead and try it. It should work.
This project has the ability to bridge local indigenous knowledge and scientific data collection, making the information needed for ocean safety decisions more accessible and relevant to our local community.
So as Bert Fuyava mentioned, second, we heard that it's key for this affordable system to bridge with Indigenous knowledge systems in order to complement them and to help make sure that the data are relevant and are useful for local communities. So lastly, we'll hear from an Arctic partner from the Alaska Eskimo Whaling Commission.
The Alaska Eskimo Whaling Commission was approached about the wave buoy project. What appealed to us about the project was that it has a collaborative approach and it is community-led and community-driven. Our whaling communities are located along the Arctic coast of Alaska and rely on the resources from the sea to feed our communities. The sea can be very unforgiving and dangerous, and it changes all the time. This technology will allow us to improve safety for our hunters and better understand environmental changes.
So, and finally, as we heard from Leslie, we heard that in order to be sustaining and actually bridge knowledge systems, communities must be in the driver's seat. So let's talk more about the whole team that we set up to help address these really key needs that we were hearing across all three regions. So in addition to the three regional associations, PacIOOS, NANUS, and PacIOOS that I mentioned, we initially teamed up in each region with a few founding communities or community organizations. In the Pacific Northwest, that was the Quinault Indian Nation and the Quileute tribe from the Pacific Northwest, or both on Washington coast. The Marshall Islands Conservation Society, or MICS, and the National Park of American Samoa and the Pacific Islands, and the Alaska Eskimo Whaling Commission in the Arctic. And then to amplify our reach and our success, we rounded out the team with technology, education, and project management partners. So Weston Solutions there is our project manager, and really like this kind of project, especially across three regions, really needs that type of personnel to help us manage. So this has been an amazing additional part of the project and starting in year 2. So Far Ocean is our co-PI and also our technology partner. So they provide the buoy, but they more importantly provide technical support and the back-end data flow that we utilize for our data delivery tools. And then our education partners are helping to develop curricula based on the Backyard Buoys for a variety of levels from elementary through college and beyond. And in the Pacific Islands, those partners are Hawaii Sea Grant, specifically Kelly Anderson Tagarino based at the American Samoa Community College in American Samoa, and Andrew McInnes based at the College of Marshall Islands on Madro. And also the Conservation International Hawaii program with Matt Ramsey, Kalei, Nuuhiwa, and Ching. Okay, so how do we achieve our mission and really try to meet these three major needs that we identified? So first, it really starts with trust. We started with trusted partners and partnerships that have been built on long-term relationships. And in many cases, these are relationships that have been forged over decades, not just a few months or even a few weeks, but long-term with the actual people involved, not necessarily just the organization. So for an example, for us in the Pacific Islands, PacIOOS hadn't directly worked with MICS, but we had worked with the executive director, Dolores DeBroom-Catil, in her previous role at RMI EPA. And then we have a core team of 9 that provides project administration and coordination. And this team meets currently every week for an hour at least. Then our work is all co-designed with our founding partner communities, and we work together to build a bespoke wave buoy program for each community. In phase 1 of our project, we worked with our partners to interview broader reach of community members to learn more about how to proceed and what the greatest needs and expectations for the project would be. We have a co-design working group that helps guide this iterative process along the way and ensure that we continue to have these hard discussions, such as how do we include and bridge different knowledge systems throughout our project. So this group meets about monthly, depending on the focus of the project partners at the time. And we take advantage of lower cost, user-friendly wave buoys, such as this one up here from SOFAR Ocean, and communities receive their own spotter wave buoys. In some cases, especially in the Pacific Islands, these buoys will also include subsurface instruments for measuring parameters like bottom temperature. And we have a buoy working group that customizes deployment solutions and lessons learned, and they currently meet monthly. We are co-creating new tools for accessing wave data at sea and on land with community input to ensure that the data are understandable and accessible, especially in remote regions. So as one of our community partners, actually Dua from the Marshall Islands Conservation Society, emphasized during one of the working group meetings, if our communities don't understand the data, then it's not their data. So we also have a data tools working group that combines the data needs with custom technological data access solutions. And they also currently meet monthly. You can see a rhythm going on here. And finally, we work with educators to develop curricula for the next generation of ocean stewards. And Jordan's going to talk more about kind of what they've been up to. The education working group develops materials, media, curricula to help communities learn about ocean waves, about buoys, about connecting with different knowledge systems and more. And they also meet, as you might guess, monthly. So all of these pieces of our approach are really essential for enhancing safety at sea by improving access to data and supporting autonomy of the communities that we're working with. And we tried to convey this integrative, collaborative approach in our Backyard Buoys logo, which is displayed here and designed by the talented Santa Moreno. And I just wanted to call out, especially if any of you live on the windward side, Santa has an art wall of her watercolor paintings in the Icky Love Art Gallery in Kailua during the whole month of March. So if you're anywhere near Kapa'a Quarry, go check her out. So she's obviously an amazing graphic artist, but she's also incredible with watercolors. I don't know how she does it. And we've now had 2 all-hands meetings for Backyard Buoys, one in Ukqiavik, Alaska. That was actually Jordan's first week on the job. I think it was a pretty awesome way to start working. And then one in Honolulu just last month. And in both cases, these offered an opportunity for people to deepen relationships, to further establish trust, to share stories and lessons learned, and to learn more about each other. And I'll be the first to admit that I've cried at both of these meetings because they are just so impactful, and there's nothing like face-to-face. And just the stories and the sharing that came out of those meetings was just incredible, and really, like, you know, it gives you the energy and the force and the will to like keep going even when things are really hard and everyone's overworked. But you hear about the benefit that, you know, fishers and hunters are actually seeing in the water, on the ground with this project and in their communities, and it just makes it all worthwhile. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jordan. Let's talk about data.
Yeah, data.
Oh, yes.
I have. I love to. I just wanted to point out in this picture, it's the classic example where some people knew we were doing the like silly photo, and others still thought we were on the serious photo. So it took me a few times looking at this photo to realize like some of the different things going on in there. So Pua takes the cake. So yeah, data access, obviously with any ocean instrumentation, any sorts of data collecting instrument, a big challenge is getting the data to the users in the way that is going to be most helpful for the users. So what we've heard from our different partners in each of our smaller meetings and in the all hands meetings is that we need to have solutions that are going to work in no bandwidth, low bandwidth, and higher bandwidth situations. So in the low or the no bandwidth situation, we could have we're working on a text to buoy option where you would text a code and it would send you the latest wave information directly to your phone. Sometimes you may not have that. So we're working on solutions like through VHF, where you have the weather channels on VHF or other types of communication formats. And then for cases where you have a little bit more connectivity, we're working on this low bandwidth application that's been custom designed for this project. And so this presentation will be shared, and so you can click on this link and get to go and see the app. So right now the app, you can go to the app and you'll see a map when you first land on it. It'll show an icon of a buoy of a buoy. Yeah, it's not that kind of app. It'll show a list and a map of different buoys. You can click on the buoy, or you can go to the list and choose the buoy of interest. And you'll see here kind of this summary of information, which gives you wave height, period, direction, spread, water temperature. And now we just actually, from a recent revision, added barometric pressure. So there's also a comment section where you can add comments that other people will be able to share. It's getting rough out, headed in, for example. The super exciting part that you'll see here is here's the same screen where you get to see the most recent plot of the last few days worth of data. But you'll notice the one on the right is in English. The one on the left is in Samoan. So this is the first of our new language translations. This translation was from our partner Puatuaua, who was the one that won the photo contest in the group photo back there. Meanwhile, Vonnerik Boktok and Andrew McInnes in the Marshalls are working on the Marshallese translation right now. So really excited to be getting some of these languages out. And the Samoan was the first additional language that we added to it, but we're also working on a couple of the Arctic languages right now as well. So here's an example. If you go to our website, which is backyardbuoys.org, you'll see a map of the different buoys that are deployed. This map is not particularly helpful, but what it does show you is the massive portion of ocean that's being covered by this project, which I think is the really cool part of this. this image. So right now there's data from 16 different buoys that are available to the communities. For the Pacific Islands, for reference, that's us in the upper right in Hawaii, though I know some people are online from Alaska and other places, so you can figure out where you are. The only buoy that we have out currently deployed in the Pacific so far is, or in the tropical Pacific, is in Majuro. And this is a photo of Andrew and the team from MICS and others when they deployed that buoy in November, I think it was. The other markers on this here show American Samoa, where we're almost finished with permitting a couple of more buoys for deployment in the Manua Islands. Ponape and Palau, we're working on site selection right now for some buoys. And Guam and Saipan, we have locations selected and are just working on the permitting at this point. And those are all with a whole suite of different partners. Off the Washington coast, we've conducted successful test deployments for both the Quileute and the Quileute tribe and the Quinault Indian Nation. And their buoys made it through a couple of really big storms. They had, Ning, do you remember it was over 20-foot significant wave height or something? Over 20-foot waves, and their buoys deployed or managed to survive. But it was also a great opportunity for us to figure out how to tweak the mooring designs to make them more robust. They did survive, but they moved location a little bit on some of those big waves. So that gave us a great opportunity to tweak the mooring designs and improve the plan. So the team at the Alaska Eskimo Whaling Commission takes the cake so far. They've managed to deploy 13 buoys. They've got permitting completed for 18 of those buoys. And their buoys are seasonally deployed based on the ice. So they put them out and then pull them back. Oops, I advanced the wrong computer. So here's a zoomed in version of that north slope, just so that you can see how far spread out they are. So we're not talking about just one community here. We're talking about a very large distance that is covering a lot of different communities, which involves a lot of communication and a lot of trust and a lot of co-development and a lot of planning, as Melissa was talking about all those different pieces earlier. And that gets us to the education part. The education, I think, especially in this group through PI-CASC and Sea Grant, we know this group really values education and understands the importance of capacity building and communication and education for any of these projects to be sustainable. So that's really the goal of this project, is to develop locally relevant ways to engage people around these data, to make these programs more sustainable, to support multiple levels and modes of learning. So this is all the different regions, different age groups from middle school up, community engagement, formal education, and informal conversations, and then helping each other understand what's happening in the other regions to provide extra context. So in Alaska, the education collaboration is primarily with the Alaska Native Science and Engineering Program, or ANSEP. So they've did both a summer and a school year program where they developed a curriculum around data science, working with these mini buoys. They made this little orange guy as a mini buoy with an accelerometer on it, so that you can move the buoy around and actually then see how that registers changes in data. They learned to tie knots that you would need in order to tie the float to a mooring. And then they learned about the different types of data and how to work with data. In Washington, or in the Pacific Northwest, the education collaboration has really been spearheaded through Sam Kastner at Western Washington University, who has created an undergraduate course around waves and tides, but all framed under the idea of being able to deploy these buoys with the students so they can experience the field component, work through the data, understand both the theory and the applications. And then the really cool thing is he's taken case studies from each of the different regions, and the students can pick which one of those case studies they want to work on. So he's got an American Samoa case study that students in Washington can work on. Or there's an Arctic wave field, North Slope wave field project that these students can work on. Or they can work on a project right there on Washington sea levels, depending on what their interests are. And then in the Pacific Islands, it's been a combination of school programs. On the photo on the top right is Andrew McInnes during a presentation where he did a Marine Science Day talk with a bunch of school kids. I had a really hard time choosing which photo. We could have just had a whole slideshow of Andrew's presentation because it's just Andrew with a bunch of really just happy kids and a bunch and buoys. On the bottom left here is an example of Pua again at the Fishers Forum during one of the Fishery Council meetings. And this was where he then set up a booth, or the Park Service set up a booth, and he talked to people about ocean safety using both the small buoy and then using that to also talk about the larger wave buoys that PacIOOS supports in American Samoa and helping to connect those dots with ocean safety. And something that we think is really cool is you'll see this version of the PacIOOS or the Backyard Buoy logo on the right there, but it's modified for American Samoa, where they've added a local proverb or adage, which is snare the bird, but watch the wave. So anytime you're out on the ocean, whether you're harvesting or fishing or whatever, never turn your back on the ocean. So what are some of the lessons that have been learned so far? I was working on this talk last weekend while staying at somebody's house that's at the Alaska CASC. And we were talking about efforts to have more collaboration across the regions and trying to discuss what are the things that have made this project so successful. And so I really spent a lot of the weekend kind of thinking about like, what are some of the little nuggets that we've been able to take away? I think most of these are things that Melissa kind of stressed in her intro slide, but relationships and trust take a lot of time to build, and you can't rush that. And there's no substitute for face-to-face information sharing and listening. And so we have, obviously, Melissa mentioned the weekly meetings and the monthly meetings, and now our annual all hands meetings. So the all hands meetings are in person, and they've been so critical to helping build those relationships that have led to the Zoom meetings being more productive. Really relying on the local partnerships and the local champions. And that was what Leslie had mentioned in her video from the Alaska Eskimo Whaling Commission about it needing to be community-led and community stewarded. And so the local part is really the key that we've found here. And identifying some small discrete outcomes, I think, is really helpful, so that instead of focusing on we're going to deploy 30 buoys and create an entirely new system of co-development and wave information, it's let's get in a room and chat about what some of the problems are. And seeing that as an actual outcome, just the conversations, I think has been really good to then let it grow into something more. Remote coastal communities of the Pacific have a lot in common, even if the temperature of their water is really, really different. Turns out that remote regions of Alaska, even though they're connected to the land, are really just islands in the Pacific. A sincere willingness to iterate over both the processes and the outcomes. I think we've all in this project have realized you had an idea, it didn't work out for any number of reasons, and being willing to just roll with that and say, okay, cool, let's figure out what the next step is. Having a lot of the different working groups fractured off has been really valuable, so that you don't have people trying to talk about the mooring design and educational conversations, curricula in the same conversation. Yes, they ultimately do come together, but making sure that those groups can have the organic discussions that they need to have. And then really something that we've been thinking about since we got our NSF funding has been thinking about how to sustain this program moving forward. and both financially, but then also through partnership investment and that stewardship of the local communities. Anything to add to that?
I just like how.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Let me go back. Yeah. I meant to. Yeah, so the point of the photos that were each selected. So on the bottom left is Ning, who's in the room with us here from Pacific Islands, with Jan Newton, who's the director for NANUS, which is the PacIOOS equivalent in Washington. And the middle photo is the group from American Samoa doing an ABA ceremony at the all hands meeting for everyone, so that everyone could experience their culture. And then on the right, the two gentlemen on the left side of the photo are from the Alaska Eskimo Whaling Commission. And Pua, once again, made the candid shot, having a very impassioned conversation with those gentlemen. So yeah, it's just such a cool, and that really goes back to that whole face-to-face thing. It's hard to hug over Zoom. I mean, you can try, but. Yeah, and I think that's all we have. So this photo is the Pacific Islands team from Backyard Buoys. At least it's a big portion of our team. It's not everybody, it's not all the partners. The previous group photo you saw was all of the regions, and then this is the Pacific region. So
I know Monarch was on.
yeah, so we do, maybe I will stop sharing and see, we had a couple of our partners from the region were on the call. So Vonerick, I see you on there. I'm trying to see if there's others from the team. If anybody wants to make any comments. Ning, anybody else? Jim, yeah, Ning? Oh, 1 second.
I'm very impressed by this project. In a way, it's two-way work together. It's not just as researcher, you just tell the people what they need. It's listen and then think and give feedback. It's a two-way communication. It's such a wonderful way to work together with the community.
Thanks. Jim, did you have any comments or?
General comments and questions?
Oh, we're just giving like Backyard Buoys folks
Oh,
opportunity to chime in if you don't have.
well, I had a general comment.
Jim's like, I don't know, I was zoning out, I forgot.
Actually, I had a couple comments. First of all, this is the best free lunch I ever had. I don't know where it came from. And that was broke them out. Second, I think it's, so we started with an overview of PacIOOS. PacIOOS started back in 2008 with a bunch of people that really didn't know what we were doing. And it grew into this fantastic enterprise that it is today through your hard work, but also our former director, who happens to be sitting right here. I don't know if you guys know that, but Heather was our director for a while. So thanks to all of you for that. I wonder on the education part, I know this come up on some of the calls, but there is this potential for not only education about waves and the environment, but also the technology that goes into these buoys. Is anybody looking at that yet that you know of? And before you answer that, another thing that popped in my brain is on the education part, having students go out on deployments, because that's something that a lot of students here, I mean, we have the Hawaii Ocean Time Series and students are just like dying to get out on the ship, and we can take maybe 3, 8 times a year. These things seems like a great opportunity to get students out in the water. Thanks.
Yeah, great questions, Jim. And I'll start and then pass it up to Melissa. So Sam Kastner's course at Western Washington, the photo that was there was a couple of students that were out on a boat and they had just deployed a buoy. So they are actually going out, the whole class is going out on the boat and doing these deployments. There's probably some issues with younger than college students going out on the boats, but we can work on that later. regarding the technology question of the buoys, I think that's a great question. And that is something that the Alaska group has kind of played with a little bit in terms of having these sensors. So they've got this accelerometer and they've got a thermometer that's independent of the actual buoy. So instead of using the buoy that's sitting on the desk here, for those that can't see, it's the yellow buoy that was in a lot of the photos. It's a 16-pound buoy. It's still fairly complicated, and it's a $6,000 buoy. So maybe you don't want to have the middle school kids like throwing it around. But by having those small buoys with the sensors themselves in there, and they have the sensors talking to a computer so that they can see how the data are transmitting into the computer, that is one component of the technology that is being incorporated into the education curriculum. But I think there's a lot more pieces of that could be explored. One piece that's really interesting, and I didn't focus on. So for those in the room, you can see that the buoy is surrounded by solar panels. And on the photo, you can kind of see that's the dark pieces. In Washington, one of the things that we learned recently with one of the Washington test deployments is that there's not enough light during the winter for the battery to be charged constantly. So in noticing this, you can actually, one of the channels that you can have transmitted in your data is the voltage of the battery. So they were seeing the battery drop. The company can remotely change the sampling interval of the buoy. So they reduced the sampling interval of the buoy to a third or a half or something like that during January, when there wasn't much light in Washington, and the voltage went back up, because now they found that nice little trade-off between the amount of sunlight that they had and that data storage. And so I think that that's another component of the data that could be really fun for the kids to explore. You know, have the buoy in a lighted room and then have the buoy in a dark room. And so there's lots of pieces of the technology that could be part of the curriculum further.
Sorry, I wasn't saying stop.
Yeah, no, go for it.
Yeah, and Jim, I think what you say too about getting students out in the water is a great idea. And I kind of, after the fact, I was thinking like, oh, we should have added like kind of what's next for the backyard buoys and as a slide. But so I'll just say it now. So we definitely are looking or willing and interested in expanding the program, I'll say, in the Pacific Islands. I'm only speaking for the Pacific Islands. And so if there are communities or other potential, it doesn't have to be a community steward necessarily, right? But this has been our focus over, because that's the hardest part. But if there is an academic partner, for example, that would love to have a buoy out there that could also serve the data and serve other purposes for education, we could talk about that and see what that looks like, especially, throughout the region and different locations. I know there's a charter school on the Kona coast, Hawaii Island, that's interested, and we've been having conversations with them about potentially putting out a buoy and their high school students managing it. So we're definitely open to that. We haven't really delved into it so much, but those conversations are kind of next on the plate for sure. So you know where to find me.
It's like the schools that have a hamster and you can take it home for the weekend.
Adopt a buoy.
Let me just check did any of the online, I can't see who.
Yeah, I didn't see anybody jump in yet. Nothing in the chat yet, but you'd invited some folks from the other IOs.
Yeah, a couple of and some of our regional partners. So we did see Vonerick was on there. Vonerick is the one I mentioned that's doing some of the translations of the Marshallese language of the app. He's based in Majuro. He's one of our PacIOOS liaisons with Andrew there, and also works with the RMI EPA. And I think, yeah. So otherwise, I think we'll.
Okay, yeah, well, we can open it up to other questions here in the audience and online. Folks online, feel free to leave questions in the chat or come off mute, raise your virtual hand, whatever you prefer there. I think I saw Hal's hand go up first. We'll get to you next. Yeah.
I just want to say that this is incredible. I didn't know that this thing even went this far as education and involving students. It's just awesome, just awesome. I got so many questions, but one that comes to mind is when you deploy these things, you say you have to go through a permitting process. What does that involve?
That's the most
Briefly.
fun part. I don't know, maybe you should take that one. You've been involved more.
Well, it's the same process for permitting these buoys as if we wanted to put out any other type of instrumentation or mooring or anything. So there's a US Army Corps permit, there's a environmental impacts evaluation, essential fish habitat, there's a NOAA evaluation. Depending on where we are, there's a suite of different federal and local permitting that we have to go through. Which I wouldn't say that's one of the reasons we picked some of the partners we have, but some of the partners we have conveniently are also, like in Guam, one of them is also the entity that does some of the local near shore permitting. And so once we get the federal piece done, then that partner has said, oh yeah, we can help steward the local permitting really easily because it's actually our office that does that. So it's, some of the permits have taken, American Samoa has taken months, maybe 6 months, maybe. So,
But I'll add two things. I'll add that the solutions, the project management team that I called out earlier, they have been instrumental in helping get a lot of these permits by putting together this, what do they call it? Permitting package, basically, that has almost all of the information except the very localized information that then the local partners and we help add in for the Pacific Islands. And that has been a huge help and definitely fast-tracked us more than we would have been able to do without.
Heather, I saw your hand up.
Sure, yeah. Thanks, that was awesome. I remember when the spotter buoys like started like 10 or 12 years ago, and I was like obsessed with them. I actually thought they were just floats, so it's good. I was like, okay, these guys are putting them out floating, but you're mooring them, which is great. Anyway, my question more is the longevity of the buoys, because like the presentation really focused on awesome things, which is getting data back to the communities, but are they also in places where they're going to be able to inform like predictions or better modeling for inundation or sea level or anything like that over a long period of time, or will they get like pulled out? They won't have gathered enough data.
Oh, right. So the hope is definitely to sustain them in the locations long-term. And so that's part of the effort right now is figuring out what does that funding look like. And so with IRA funding, the Inflation Reduction Act funding through PacIOOS, we're extending that timeline by about 5 years, which is great after NSF funding. And then it's kind of like, okay, then we'll figure out what the next 5 years looks like. So in terms of funding and keeping them out there, that's that. Ning, I don't know if you want to comment on like the modeling and how it can inform that piece.
With those extra small buoys, it's definitely help with the modeling effort. With the traditional buoys, most of them were deployed at 200 meter and deeper, but with a lot of areas, there is localized like a wave condition, inundation conditions, we don't know. Those buoys are so easily flexible to deploy, will definitely give us more information to improve the accuracy of the modeling work.
Thanks, Ning.
and if I can add one more thing to that, just to toot Jim's horn. So Jim and a couple of others that are leading the data tools working group have done a lot to working on mechanisms where the data are going to be more easily shared, not just within Backyard Buoys, but SOFAR Ocean. For those of you that are familiar with an ERDAP, which is just a way to serve data, SOFAR Ocean was not familiar with some of the data sharing tools, but now as a result of this project, they've said, oh yeah, cool, we'll do one of those. And there's another program that had put a bunch of these buoys out around the world, but mostly in the Pacific. And they've signed on also to replicate that process so that many buoys beyond those buoys that are part of Backyard Buoys are going to have their data more accessible through a approach that someone like Ning can then write a little bit of code and automatically pull the data from all those buoys in, whereas right now that doesn't really exist. So.
Great. I want to go to our online audience, folks. Any questions online? Feel free to just hop off mute or raise your virtual hand in there or put it in the chat. Second, not seeing you at the moment. I have a question while we're waiting on that, and we'll get back to you. Maybe sort of related to what Heather said. It's generally up to like at least in U.S. territorial waters, up to like the National Weather Service to give high surf advisories and warnings. I'm wondering if there's efforts, I know you probably work closely with them anyways, to operationalize the information that's coming off this, maybe help improve these warnings, or is it at this point just up to the individual users to kind of interpret the data? Are you giving them advice on thresholds and things localized? How are those conversations going if they are?
That's a great question. So we do have a really great relationship with the National Weather Service Pacific Islands region. The buoys that we have out right now, so the bigger data well buoys, they check those daily and they use those to inform their forecasts and for coastal hazards, as well as looking at so we have to make sure that we are not putting out any warnings or advisories, right? We just provide the information, hopefully making it as easy to understand and use as possible. But then even the Weather Service can then look at our forecasts and take that into account as well when they're issuing advisories and warnings. With regard to the backyard buoys, I feel like Jordan's had more discussions with them about the potential for including those. Do you want to?
Yeah, well, I didn't see Brandon become on here, but I would be remiss if I didn't channel my inner Brandon and say, only the National Weather Service issues alerts for a wave height. We do not do that. We do not determine what level of wave is dangerous or not dangerous. What we have done is in the app, I say we as though I had anything to do with the app. There are tools within the app where a user can set thresholds for individual buoys, and we're working on notifications, if not an alert, notifications when the wave exceeds one of the thresholds that the user sets, then they will hopefully be able to get a notification in their email or their phone or however they choose. One of the big questions, this is really where the tricky part of bridging those knowledge systems comes in, because there's a lot of local knowledge where someone will say, we know that if, like in Palau, someone told me, we know if we can't see that island, it's too rough to go out. But, similarly in Guam, someone said, oh yeah, people drive 30 minutes to this spot and then they evaluate this spot. And if this spot is rough, then they won't drive the extra 30 minutes to go farther. And so we're trying to make it so that they could drive to that spot a couple of times, look at the app and do their own custom calibration and say, okay, the app was at this, it was pretty questionable. Obviously waves are super complicated, right? Like it's coming from multiple directions. You have all sorts of different things that are going to make those conditions more or less dangerous on a particular time. But we're trying to provide people with those tools so that they can come up with some of these bridges between their traditional understanding of the conditions and being able to then be at home. And the other thing that came up a lot during our conversations at the last all hands meeting between connecting the information of the elders who were typically much more comfortable going out and looking at the trees or the birds versus the youth today who are much more comfortable looking at their phone. So this is a place where we heard conversations about the elders and the youth talking to each other. And instead of it being one or the other, using both of these pieces of information, especially because we heard from all three regions that those traditional landmark approaches aren't working as readily anymore. Things are changing. It used to be that you looked at that island and it was safe. And now it's not the same. So, sorry, that was a long answer, but I was saying.
Awesome. That's just awesome. I think we have time for one more question. I saw one in the room. You want to go ahead?
Hi, wonderful presentation. I was just curious about the co-design process, because it seems like, it's by and large a pretty technological solution, it's deploying buoys and creating buoys. What does that look like in your projects? And were there stipulations in the grant for that co-design? Yeah, just want to hear a little bit more about that process.
Yeah, so sorry, you kind of cut out the end. So like, what does co-design look like for this project?
Yeah.
Okay. That's a great question. So it's kind of like the whole, the project, we're definitely leveraging this low-cost buoy, right? But it's really about the whole process of bringing together, you know, academia, community, tribes and community groups, different nonprofit organizations, federal organizations. So bringing all the partners together and figuring out the first thing is like, what is the community goal? And so figuring out like what very locally, what whoever is working on the ground wants to get out of the project. And then all of us working to support that goal. And it's different, right, for each location. And so I'll say for the Alaska and the Pacific Islands, autonomy and really having the ability to make those decisions, like where do the buoys go? Who puts them out? Who takes care of them? What do the data look like? Who has access to the data? All of those things, you know, are in the hand. Decision-making is at the community level. Whereas the Pacific Northwest, they've been asking for buoys for decades. And they're like, we just want the buoys, just get us the buoys. So for those two tribes, it was like, kind of like, okay, we know what you need. Like, we're here to help you kind of thing. Like you've been asking, we're here. So it's really, so, I mean, that's the big piece of it. It's like, it's different in every region. It's different in every community. But then even as we figure out like what each piece of that looks like. So with the buoys, it's, you know, like where the siting is a big part, right? Because a lot of times, like, well, and I'll say for PacIOOS, for example, it's co-design in how we chose the buoy, our larger buoys that we've deployed over the years, in the sense that we try to address multiple stakeholder needs, but it's not down to a community village level or, you know, even like for the in the other parts of our region, smaller island level. It's really like, okay, what is the Weather Service asking for their forecasts? What does the Army Corps need for their future development projects? You know, and then also taking into account what do other organizations want, but really trying to address as many needs as we can, right, with one buoy, which can be difficult. Whereas this one, it's really like, okay, what do you want? You know, like, how many buoys do you want? Do you want more than one? Do you want, you know, several like lined up? Like initially in Alaska, for example, they were thinking they would have kind of a line perpendicular out from the shoreline in each village. That's what the Alaskan Eskimo Whaling Commission, they were like, this is what we want. And then kind of as they were doing it, they're like, that doesn't really work. So they changed it like as they were deploying, and they kind of figured it out. And then with the co-design with the app, so we have someone, you know, developing the technology, but then it's having the community members and the partners saying, well, this is what we want to see. Or like, so we'll develop it like the prototypes and like that doesn't really work. Like, can you change it this way? You know, can we show the data this way? This is confusing, the language, you know, so really just all pieces of it. And then I think same for the education. It's like, well, this is going to resonate with our, you know, middle schoolers, but this isn't, and that kind of thing. I don't know, anything else to add on that?
It's just the crisp.
I know that's so.
Yeah.
Yeah, does that kind of answer your question? Okay, sorry, I mean, it's like, it's a lot, right? But it's like each piece of it is co-design, like the whole project is about figuring out how to do it. It's about the process, not about, like, it's about getting buoys in the water at some degree, right? Because we want to help provide that data that people are asking for. But it's really about figuring out how to do it. And I think the fun part is that we're now, I mentioned the IRA funding. So there's now we're 3 regions out of 11 of the PacIOOS national program. The other 8 are now looking at us and saying, okay, we're ready. We want to participate too. And so now we kind of have like these background materials and things and like process figured out. It's going to be different in each region, right? But we have it at least figured out a little bit in terms of like what's needed for instrumentation. And so we're talking about using it for water level stations too, and not just buoys. So I think that's the exciting part, that this can expand to many different ways. Yeah. Thanks for the question. Sorry, I kind of rambled.
That was great. Thank you. Thank you all very much. So join me in a round of applause for. Thank you all very much for being with us today and sharing with us on this great project. And thanks to all the PacIOOS folks out there and all your partners in this great effort. It's really, really interesting, exciting. I want to encourage folks in the room to stick around for a slice of pie that Rachel kindly baked for us. Thank you. A Backyard Buoys key lime pie, right? All right. And then I also want to encourage folks to join us in person for our next Slice of PI-CASC Seminar, Tuesday, April 2nd at noon, here and online again. With Dr. Dean Gesh with the USGS Earth Resources Observation and Science, or EROS Center, who share with us on some related work on characterizing inundation risks and enhancing stakeholder capacity for coastal inundation assessments in the Marshall Islands. Also, again, I want to remind folks to join us in supporting some of our emerging PI-CASC graduate scholar researchers and learn about some really cool science at the 2024 PI-CASC Graduate Scholar Symposium on Thursday, March 28th as part of Hawaii Climate Week. Look for more announcements on that to come. As you're logging off of Zoom, please take a moment to fill out our short online survey, especially if you have ideas for future seminars, and look out for more reminders and links to come. And otherwise, thank you all for joining us. See you next month. Aloha.